15 different detectives from our entire Michigan State Police 5th District Special Investigation Section. During this investigation, as part of a neighborhood canvass, David Brian Kidney, white male, 6'15" of 55, was re-interviewed on September 15th, 2017 by Detective Sergeant Lass and Detective Sergeant Steensma in the backyard of his residence for approximately 45 minutes. He had previously been interviewed in June 2014 by Detective Dan Nichols. During this follow-up interview in 2017, Mr. Kidney appeared to be cooperative and answered the questions posed to him by the detectives. Prior to this interview, detectives were aware of a dispute between Mr. Kidney and Mr. Dwayne Finney over minor issues that had occurred back in 2007. During this interview, Mr. Kidney told Detective Sergeant Lass and Detective Sergeant Steensma that in May 2009 he owned assorted guns, including a Beretta 9mm Luger handgun. 2 days after this meeting, Mr. Kidney was contacted by Detective Sergeant Steensma and was told he was unable to locate two of his weapons that he had previously disclosed, a .22 caliber handgun and a 9mm Luger handgun. Based on background information, investigators knew that Mr. Kidney had a Beretta 92 FS 9mm Luger handgun registered to him back in 1991, so prior to the homicide. Furthermore, forensic evidence from the original 2009 crime scene at the skate ranch in the form of bullets and fired cartridge casings showed that one of the weapons used in the murder could have been a Beretta 9mm Luger handgun. After the interview with Mr. Kidney, subsequent attempts were made to contact him for an additional statement. However, he never responded. At that point, it was decided to draft a search warrant for his residence for any weapons and a DNA sample for evidentiary comparison. On January 24th, 2018, Michigan State Police detectives and troopers served the search warrant at Mr. Kidney's residence in Union City, which culminated in an exchange of gunfire between Mr. Kidney and law enforcement, seriously wounding Detective Sergeant Aaron Steensma and Trooper Dan Thayer. Troopers returned fire in the incident, fatally wounding Mr. Kidney. On his persons, detectives seized two weapons consisting of a Beretta 92 FS 9mm Luger handgun and a Ruger Mini 14 .223 rifle. The Beretta handgun that was seized, which is right here, was sent to the MSP Lansing lab and compared to the bullets and fired cartridge casings recovered at the original crime scene where Mr. Dwayne Finney was shot. Both the casings and bullets were conclusively matched by the lab to the Beretta 9mm handgun investigators seized from Kidney, the one I'm holding in my hand. After the weapons match, additional interviews and investigative subpoenas were conducted, and at this point, investigators are highly confident David Kidney is the murderer of Dwayne Finney. The investigation will remain open due to MSP protocol, but the cold case investigators will no longer actively work this incident. If anybody has any questions regarding the evidence in the investigation for me at this time, I will take them with what we've covered. Yes, sir.
Lieutenant, was there any indication there was a second person in that vehicle?
There is evidence in that vehicle that in the form of some voiding that we have checked into and have conducted interviews directly on that. And at this point, we have no information to suggest that another person was involved. However, if anybody has any additional information, the case is still going to remain open, and we will take any information and follow up on any additional leads that the public would provide.
Was the victim shot by multiple weapons?
No. The victim was shot by this weapon.
What were the disputes that led to this happening?
The disputes were real minor in nature. One was a tree limb. Back in this time frame, both lived in the trailer park. The victim, Mr. Finney, and the suspect, Mr. Kidney. And a tree limb had been cut down from a tree that Mr. Kidney took issue with, and then there were some soccer-type balls kicked into his yard that he had an issue with. And this issue and altercation had occurred prior to the murder ever happening, but the two of them had ceased contact with each other for a number of years.
Chuck, any indication that he had planned this, or was it a spur of the moment thing, that the killing? Have you been able to establish that?
Well, based on how it all happened, I believe there was a plan put in place by Mr. Kidney to do this because he had to have laid in wait, so to speak, for Mr. Finney to get ready to go to work. Mr. Finney had a very specific schedule that he followed every day. So it would have taken some pre-planning to, one, recognize his schedule when he left, what he did, and then two, to make a point to wait for him to get in the vehicle and then enter the vehicle himself and drive to where they drove before he was killed.
Can you go back to 2009? A lot of people probably don't remember the incident, like what basically happened on that day.
Well, the Mr. Finney left to go to work like he did every morning in the early morning hours, and he ended up driving, we believe, initially in the same direction. We believe Mr. Kidney entered the vehicle in the trailer park. I mean, this is speculation. This is a theory, okay? He has the weapon. Whatever is said in the car. They make the drive over to the skate ranch, which is a short distance, a couple of turns from the trailer park in which they lived. And at that point, whatever was said or happened exactly in that car, we will not know. But we do know that he was shot, we believe, while he was driving because of the way the vehicle came to a rest over by the skate ranch.
Skate ranch still there?
Yes.
It is. What was the name of the trailer park? Do you remember? Do you happen to know? Does anybody know?
Fairview Estates.
Fairview Estates.
Fairview Estates.
Does Mr. Finney still have family in the area, and if so, what was their reaction to the solving the case?
He does, and you know, he has a widow, and at this point, I really want to. I'd also like to take the opportunity to sincerely thank her. Her name's Crystal Finney, for her patience during the investigative process that took place. I mean, it's been years, and she has been excellent. Detective Sergeant Lass and Detective Nichols have dealt with her for basically a decade. And, you know, our hope with all of this, she has this information right now, but she didn't want to be here just because of the emotional aspect, but we hope by providing this information, it'll provide a modicum of closure for both her and the community, because this has been open a long time. But
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I don't know, how many times had Kidney been interviewed throughout this entire process? And correct me if I'm wrong, you said that he had been cooperative up until, I guess, the shooting that involved Mr. Sousa.
He had been interviewed, what we would call a formal interview, on 2 occasions. One by Detective Nichols and then the other by Detective Sergeant Steensma and Detective Sergeant Lass when the case was reopened. The subsequent attempts were made for him to come in, which he never did, which brought us to the subsequent search warrant that was drafted for his house. And as you recall in that, the door was knocked on. He wouldn't come to the door. He was spotted with a long gun inside. Detective Sergeant Steensma got pinned down behind a vehicle that was parked in its drive for a while, and then he was able to get behind a shed. We had a raid team there, fortunately, and when he came out, he came out shooting, and that's when 2 of our troopers were injured, and then he was ultimately killed.
Was he considered a suspect from the get-go, considering their history?
Whenever we do a cold case, there's a list that we'll compile after reading through all the reports and indexing the reports with all the names of people that were interviewed. And what we compile is a person of interest list. He was definitely a person of interest from the start, yes.
Were there others?
Yes, yes, but they were eliminated through the investigative process.
So you knew all the weapons he had, Mr. Kimney, based on registration and gun ownership, was that?
Well, not exactly. We knew the weapons he had based on what he told us. Handguns are registered, long guns are not. So we were depending on him for the information on whatever long guns he had. And when I say long guns, I'm referring to a rifle. But
He openly admitted that he had that gun.
he did, yes, and had kept this weapon for that many years after he did the murder with it, which is somewhat amazing.
Would he have gotten away with it if he got rid of the weapon?
That's speculation, but it would have been a lot more difficult to prove a case against him without the weapon.
Was the Beretta,
Absolutely.
was the Beretta recovered in his residence? Is that right?
No, the Beretta, after the shootout occurred, and he was deceased, and we approached him. He was carrying 2 weapons on him. One was the Ruger Mini 14, what a lot of people refer to as a ranch rifle, .223 caliber, and then the other in a shoulder holster was placed in that holster on this side of him after the altercation and the gunfight took place. So this was seized from him the day we served the search warrant, and he was carrying it with one in the chamber and then the magazine fully loaded.
How does this feel for you guys now that this is closed?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
How does it feel for you all that this case can finally be closed?
Well, and like I said, these do remain open, but we believe we absolutely have the killer in this. It feels good always when you can clear a cold case. For the people that work on it, when you're working a cold case, it's emotionally draining because typically you're working one case typically on a cold case team, and that's all you're thinking about. Normally, if you're in a general assignment, you're getting numerous different cases to kind of occupy your mind, so to speak. But the main reason we do these is, and we take them so seriously, is you have a murderer out on the street that could do it again, and when you solve one of those, you know that person isn't going to be able to do that again. In this particular situation, I've thought about this one a lot because you know, these always take a lot of time and a lot of resources, which is fine. But you know, we had 2 troopers that were shot in this incident, and, you know, that, I assigned personally Detective Sergeant Steensma to this case, and when I heard the radio traffic, you know, I thought he was dead, because Detective Sergeant Lass was on the radio and by her voice. So, you know, a lot of bad things happened on this to good people, but in the end, the fact that we know that that Mr. Kidney was the individual that killed Mr. Finney, you know, that does provide closure, I think, probably for everybody here.
Does Mr. Kidney have family, wife, children?
He does have some family, yes, he does have some family. Mhm. Anything else, or if you have a specific question for any of the investigators too, we'd welcome those, or the prosecutor. The prosecutor's office conducted, as was stated, investigative subpoenas in this, which were very helpful. Those investigative subpoenas took place after we had the match on the weapon, as well as the original shooting. And those take some time, so I thank the prosecutor's office for that. But if you're not familiar with that process, that's basically the equivalent of a grand jury streamlined, and you are subpoenaed to come in and testify under oath in front of the prosecutor and the investigators. And if, because of what this case is, if you lie under oath under that situation, in that, you're subject to any term of years up to life because of the capital crime. So it carries a pretty large hammer over individuals. So those investigative subpoenas were conducted by Detective Sergeant Lass and the prosecutor, and through those we feel real good about where we're at and releasing this information.
Anybody up here available for one-on-ones, or would you rather than?
No, they're available for one-on-one, sure. Yeah. Anything else?
Real quick, no offense with TV, could we get a shot of you holding the gun away from the podium a little so the mic line's not?
Oh, sorry.
Just, you know, not trying to put them on TV, but yeah, right there, that'd be great.
My audio's gonna be better than yours.
Maybe turn it. And I'm sorry, which officer was at the scene that was shot? I don't know which of you, it was you, sir, okay. Do you have any comments about this?
I'm just,
Maybe,
At the podium, if you had any comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to consider,
Yes.
we're good, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, number one, I'm just thankful that I'm here. The team that day, you know, we do what we do, and they saved my life, and I appreciate that. I'm awful grateful for Detective Sergeant Lass and Detective Nichols for taking over this for me while therapy's been my full-time job the last year and few months. And I'm glad that we've been able to give closure to the family. Like Lieutenant Christensen said, that's, you know, why we do a lot of this, is just to give closure for families so they can maybe have some peace.
Are you back on duty?
No, I'm not.
Closure for the family, but do you feel that sense of closure as well?
Oh yes, I feel closure. You know, we do these for one thing and one thing only, and I think all the investigators, we have closure in this, that, you know, we have who we need.
what was the name of the other officer that was with you that day that also was shot?
That was Trooper Dan Thayer.
How's Trooper Thayer doing?
He's back to work. He's doing good.
Are you hoping to get back to work?
Well, unfortunately, due to my injuries, I'm gonna have to retire. I tried valiantly to get back, but time in therapy is my full-time job right now, and with my injuries, I'm gonna have to retire.
How many years have you been with MSP?
Almost 21.
That's gotta be a tough decision for you. I mean, this is what you've done for 2 decades.
Yeah, it's a tough decision, but I'm at peace with it. You know, there's always a plan, and I have a new plan, and I don't know what that is yet, but we'll make that decision. But you know, I'm just thankful to MSP for allowing me to do what I do, and Lieutenant Christensen for assigning me this highly cold case so we could get closure for the family.
Could we just get your name for the record, just so we all have?
Detective Sergeant Aaron Steensma,
How do you spell the last name?
STEENSMA.
And it's Aaron, A-A-R?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, because it was. Yeah. I think they wanted this copy. Yeah. Yeah.
Have it in the right order?
Yep, that's what I'm just double checking. Yeah. Wait.
Are they starting today?
March, they're here today. Are they? Yeah. I like that story, but we gotta go to unit.
A lot of guys in your position have moved on, and bigger and better things, and I still run into Jim Carver.
We can do immediate
Yeah.
training. Immediate training.
Find something you enjoy.
We're getting those copies of that statement for all of that right now.
Hey, Nick, sorry for calling you out.